Thank you very much for that. And I'd like that as a matter of the record if I can do that as well. I'm also, like Carolyn, asking you not to certify the proposal for the rezoning of the property at 875 and 500. I'm not opposed to the Little League at all. Not one bit. In fact, we're pretty excited about having that in our community. The issue that we have is really kind of what remains not done tonight. I know you guys are going to look straight just at the rezoning. The property you're voting on is inextricably tied to a Pulte development, as Carolyn said, south of the Little League property that doesn't meet the open space ordinance without the Little League property. Or the Zionsville comprehensive plan requirements for transition phasing. Most of the units out there are 5-acre plus lots. And we're looking at lots in the Pulte development that are about 0.23, I think, on average acres, less than a quarter acre on average. So we have no transition whatsoever. It's kind of plopped right in the middle of it. If the gift to the Little League is contingent upon Pulte obtaining its variances and Little League space is required to meet open space requirements, then the question maybe I have to this group is how can you actually vote on a rezoning without understanding if the gift giver is approved to give the gift? Without that gift, there is no Little League. Without the zoning, there is no gift. And so it seems to me like you're putting the cart before the horse. And I could be wrong on that. Maybe there is no contingency. And if there's no contingency, then what I ask you to do is make it clear that there's no contingency and that the development itself would stand on its own, that it would not be allowed to use the Little League property as open space for that. Go ahead. Are we done? Or 1 minute? I'm sorry. Thank you. So I just ask that you would make that very clear as it goes to the zoning group. Also, I'm troubled by the fast tracking of the plan. I won't reread an email that I put out there, but I know from business that when you don't plan, actually I do a lot of acquisitions in my business world, and when you don't plan prior to doing an acquisition, there's a great headline that comes with the acquisition. You close and everybody's excited and it's fun, and then you get down to the real work of doing something. And if you haven't planned well, it becomes a disaster. And my big concern for this is if we have not done the road studies, if we've not considered the aesthetics, what it's going to look like coming in, what are the interchanges that the interstate's looking like, et cetera, et cetera. The roads aren't designed for heavy traffic. We can go on and on and on. Without that plan, we're looking at a disaster for the community and for our neighborhood. So my plea on that front is to at least give us the time to be able to. All right, thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Next up, we have Vicki Westbrook.
Hello, my name is Vicki Westbrook. I live at 8292 East 550 South, just on the southern border of the property. I also sent everyone an email today, and just for the record, would like you to make sure everyone did receive that. As the others have stated, I won't reiterate everything, but we've been in the community for 32 years, love everything. Kids went through Little League. We volunteered. We love everything about it. Our concern, again, is just to not rush this through. If you could give us in the surrounding areas of the property some time to have a compromise and look at the whole package and have it in keeping with our different rural properties that surround the whole property that you're wanting to develop and have the Little League sit in. You know, it just made me think I have to walk to my mailbox from where I live, so across the street. So just the more and more traffic that gets added, that will be difficult to do. So I just want you to remember this is a rural area. Some of the concerns that I also wrote were just, I know that there is a cost. A lot of developments have tried to put a whole neighborhood in this property, and they've been denied because they had to pay for sewers and for the water to be brought in and a lot of other things like that, and taxes, and these are all apparently going to be negotiated out of this, so the cost to the developer isn't as great, but it's a cost to Zionsville. Can Zionsville pay for all these things to be brought in for the glory of having the Little League put in, plus the neighborhood. So these are a lot of the concerns. We weren't sure they've been thought through very clearly, and we just hope that you will consider delaying this decision so that we can have more time to put a better proposal together so that it's a win-win for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Tom Peters.
Good evening. My name is Tom Peters. We live at 8437 East 500 South in the Brox Meadow neighborhood, but we also own the farmland directly north of the proposed area for this rezone. And we are longtime supporters of Zionsville Little League. We've spent many hours coaching, working the concession stand, field maintenance, made financial contributions to the Little League. So we're excited, like lots of Zionsville residents, about the prospect of the Central Region headquarters. But the dirty little secret that was kept from the neighbors and most of the community of Zionsville until just recently is that this project is tied in financially to a high-density development just to the south, which is totally out of character with the area of Zionsville and in direct conflict with the stated goals of the Zionsville Comprehensive Plan. In fact, all of the adjacent properties to this development that's tied to this rezone parcel are at least 1 acre, and the vast majority are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 acres. So this is totally out of character for the area. Just to quote the Zionsville zoning ordinance, quote, the open space, or let me first state that the developer is proposing to use the headquarters to fulfill the open space requirement, even though the 15 acres will not be owned by the development or the developer. It'll be owned by Little League International. And the Zionsville zoning ordinance states, the open space shall run perpetually with the open space subdivision and shall not be developed or separated from it at a later date. So I realize that tonight's vote is only on the rezoning of the 15 acres, but I would like some assurance that this package deal will be evaluated fairly and appropriately, and that any residential development on the property should be considered on its own merit, not parlayed together with the Little League proposal to take advantage of the good intentions of the people of Zionsville. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Next up, we have C. Max Schmidt.
I'm at 8680 East 550 South. Is this already on? Okay.
Here you go.
Talking about the same property. Again, the proposal by Pulte to use the RSF2 zone land north of our property for 78 homes on 40 acres. And just north of this, the proposal to place Little League headquarters on 18 acres. My wife and I and kids have been here for a couple decades, and we've enjoyed the open space out in Zionsville. We always knew that that area would get developed, and several years ago there was a proposal by Pulte to develop the land, and Pulte worked closely with us on that, and there were some concessions made, and we all kind of were moving in that direction and thought it would happen, and then it was actually voted down. Currently, the density of the proposed area now is even more dense than what was voted down before. And so the way that this is working has been stated before, and I'm sorry I'll be repetitive, but essentially my understanding and really the common thread through all this is, all of us have had to make some assumptions because we really haven't had too much data from the town in regards to this. We've had a representative who's been trying to get this data, and it just really hasn't been able to be all provided in a timely manner. But essentially, based on what we do know and we've assumed, Pulte is petitioning to use the Little League headquarters land, which would be SU7 land, to offset their open space requirement. This is totally unprecedented. I think it's sort of a slippery slope, is going to allow other things to be similarly employed. Although the neighbors here in that area, specific area, are the ones who are speaking this evening, I can assure you that other neighborhoods north of where we are a little frightened at the prospect of the density of this home development. Effectively, if allowed, the density of this 40 acres would be so out of character with the rest of the homes in the area, which has already been stated are largely 7-acre lots. As a matter of fact, we're unable to find any area in Zionsville or Whitestown, for that matter, with equivalent or higher density. Effectively, this area would be like apartments disguised as homes. So it's just very disappointing, and I hope that more information will be provided and that we can put this on a little bit of a delay so that the community can be a part of this and embrace this. We're all excited about the Little League prospect. But I think let's do it in style and not in haste and not reactionary. I mean, does Little League really want 0 lot line homes surrounding its headquarters? I mean, it's just so out of character with the rest of the area. I mean, if we're really going to welcome them in, let's do it in typical Zionsville fashion, not hurried, rushed, reactionary, desperation time.
Thanks, Mr. Schmidt. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Matt Stump.
Matt Stump. My address is 5301 South, 875 East. I've been in this room over the past 18 months multiple times, some my own dealings with Plan Commission, struggles with town over ordinances misinterpreted, so on and so forth. As such, that gives me a little extra stick in my craw regarding someone else coming in and this whole process being fast-tracked, as my neighbors have noted. I'm here as a staunch Little League supporter, both having headquarters here, kids that play in it, one in a game right now, as a matter of fact. Big believer in baseball and softball, and having it here in Zionsville is fantastic. But I'll reiterate what my neighbors have said. The town has known about this since September, which is before the folks on my side of 875 even got blessed to build. And again, we jumped through hoops for a few townspeople, town officials, that misinterpreted an ordinance. Mr. Price could speak to that, as he was the one that deftly pointed that out some time ago, even to the town's council. I cannot imagine living here and having 18 acres of Little League placed in and given credit to a private developer that's a publicly traded company. My neighbors and I have all invested heavily. We've all paid the Zionsville tax. We all love the town. We're happy to pay it. We're happy to have Little League here. I think to a person, not one of us would stand up and say we're against having the ball diamonds in the headquarters here. We're actually, I won't speak for all of them, but we're for it. It's all the strings that go along with it. And what are the costs? And I understand that SU7 could be backed up and rezoned later. My question tonight is, why the hurry? If it's not being pushed through on a fast track for certain reasons that we won't even have to discuss this evening, what would tabling it hurt at a minimum, or denying it tonight? We've asked for, I think, 7 weeks or perhaps longer for all the information. We received it less than a business day ago. It was hundreds and hundreds of pages. Some, the town questioning, or perhaps the developer, nearly 900 parking spaces would be needed for this facility. This plan shows less than 300. Those people have to park somewhere, whether it's cobblestone, along the county roads, what have you. The town has done traffic studies for 875 as early as, or as late as November of 2015. There's a plan coming down the pipe to improve the circulation in the north-south direction. We don't know when it's going to start for sure, and we certainly don't know if it's going to be done by now.
Thank you, Mr. Stump. Appreciate it. Last, we have Kevin C. Schifferl.
My name is Kevin Schifferl. I live at 8552 East 550 South. My wife lost 5 years. We've lived here 30 years, not 25, Carolyn. I love this town. And this is really sad. I went and spent the weekend with my dad planting his garden in Richmond. He taught me baseball. I love baseball. I want baseball here. This is outrageous. And if people don't see it, I don't know what we can do. We literally are asking for information and we still don't have it. This town council recently, and I know Councilman Traylor led some of the charge, dealt with the Wolf Run, and this is Wolf Run redo. No communication, none. Yet, in some of the information that I just got on Friday afternoon that we had requested from the town, I find things in here such as emails from the mayor in October discussing rezone, that the town might sponsor a rezone. What about us? We've lived here and paid taxes. Do we not matter? The mayor, knowing that this was a private development involved, when it was announced publicly that we landed this and we all were happy, we didn't know that, goes on TV and says he wants this to be a showcase. Mayor, we all share that. But don't not tell us that this is involving a private development and then come to us and expect to jam down 78 homes. On the rezone, I've raised several questions. I spent all day before church yesterday for Mr. Garrett spending, and I hope this is part of the record and you've shared it with your fellow councilmen, 5 pages, single space with questions. Questions about the traffic study. I've been told I'm wrong. There's not one required. No one has shown that. We've asked questions. Economics. What about the economics? Why would the town give a sewer hookup to a private developer for residential development? How much is this going to cost? No answers. We've asked those questions in meetings with the mayor. No answers. This demands clear, honest exposure that we can base it off the same information. Also, in this time, we've learned about this in March 24th, less than 6 weeks from now. This has been in the works going back, as we can document, back to October, September. No one, any of our neighbors were contacted. That's not how we deal with people as neighbors. I agree with what Little League pitched, which was Zionsville's community. Let's not make that a false statement. Let's make it a true one. Because right now, I got to tell you, my faith in people here is absolutely shaken.
Thank you, Mr. Schifferl. That concludes requests to speak. Under old business, we have none. Under new business, the first up is a consideration of an additional appropriation resolution from the local road and bridge funding bridge matching fund of $964,444.94 to utilize grant and special district LOIT funding to fund various 2018 street projects. This is resolution number 2018-05. This is a public hearing. I will open the public hearing. If anyone would like to speak on this, I do have proof of publication. Okay. I will close the public hearing. Mr. Lance, are you speaking on this?
That was such a thorough introduction. I don't know what else I can add, but this is the last step to make this money spendable. This money constitutes our grant funds from the state as well as our local match. These projects have begun, so this is the last step to make this money spendable.
Any questions for Mr. Lance on this? I'd take a motion as well.
Make a motion to approve.
Got a first from Vice President Traylor, second from Councilor Schuler. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Resolution number 2018-05 passes with a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Next up is a consideration of a zone map change ordinance to rezone approximately 15 acres from the urban RSF-2 residential zoning district to an SU-7 special use zoning district. This is ordinance number 2018-04. Mr. DeLong, would you mind coming up and giving us an overview on this, please?
Certainly, thank you. Good evening. The petition that's in front of you this evening is a full reading.
Can you speak in? Make sure the red's on. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. What's in front of you this evening is a favorable recommendation that's been forwarded to you from your Plan Commission related to the rezoning request of Pulte Group in service to provide a SU-7 classification, ultimately as referred to, ultimately to be used by the Little League International for their practices and their organization. The project has a favorable recommendation of 5-1 voting record on that.
And before the councilors start asking questions, it says here 15 acres, but is it actually 18 acres? Can you clarify that?
The 18 acres is the gross acreage of the property. About 3 acres will be underneath right-of-ways and roadways, but the acreage that is contained within the legal description that's attached to that certification is 18 acres.
I'll open it up to the councilors for questions for Mr. DeLong.
Yeah, Wayne, if I ask you a question you don't have the answer to, let me know, because a little bit of this is more of a business question. I mean, and it was addressed earlier. I don't know the answer. Is the Little League facility contingent upon approval of the remaining development? In other words, is it one large project that for some reason they've chosen to take a two-step process to get approved? Is that what's going on?
Business transactional, I cannot answer that specific question. Certainly the project's been broken into a rezoning request that's in front of you this evening. Certainly if I just simply don't know a party's business matters.
The property it's not in possession of the Little League nonprofit group yet. Is it contingent upon the second half, or who owns the property today? Who's that?
State Bank of Lisden?
State Bank of Lisden owns it. Okay. Do you know if they own the whole, the entirety of the property?
On the 57.7 acres, correct.
And so is State Bank of Lisden has not conveyed the property to the nonprofit? I'm sorry. The State Bank of Lisden has not conveyed the property to the nonprofit yet. That's correct, right? So it's
Filing shows that State Bank of Lisden is property owner giving consent to Pulte Group to file the petition that's in front of the Plan Commission Board of Zoning Appeals.
The second question I had, somebody else asked too. I mean, do we know what the cost of running utilities to the property is for this town?
Meeting that I attended with the mayor where he spoke to Mr. Schiffel, he said a couple of $100,000, but I do not have that information any more fine-tuned than that.
Are utilities being run, or are they a part of the master plan to run utilities there anyways, or are they being run there specifically for this project?
The North-South Connector, to answer that specific part of this larger answer, has been on the books since 1983. There's also a sewer master plan and other tools that the town has ultimately to facilitate utility extensions throughout the town. Certainly the northwest area of town is highly desirable to develop. There's certain complexities to bringing utilities to that area, but it's my understanding that utilities would be brought to that area regardless.
That northwest extension, right? With that, when they extend 875.
Folks, sorry. Let's keep comments down so we can hear the conversation here, please.
Those utility extensions are going to be all part of the 875 extension. Is that correct?
How much and how far, I do not know the answer to that specific question. I've not been involved in the design of that infrastructure.
When did the Little League project, as being presented to us, come to your attention?
We say beginning of this year. I mean, based on the reports that I provide to the town that have been published to the town's website, we start mentioning annual or bi-weekly attendance of those working meetings, which is something we typically do with many different applicants, where we sit down and spend our time working with them to facilitate their project.
In the early meetings, and again, I don't know the answer to this, so I'm asking, and I didn't understand what was going on back in January or October, some date line that was mentioned. Was it combined with the discussion of the development and Pulte homes? Was that all part and parcel of the discussion, or was it just segregated for the Little League?
I recall that it was all one lump sum conversation regarding the 57.7 acres being utilized in the fashion that's being discussed and referenced this evening.
A normal time frame from when a developer, family developer, I'm going to come and I've got a project I'm going to pitch and get help with. Is that a normal time frame, say, from the first of the year to now to get in front of the Planning Commission?
I would say so. We meet with many different applicants throughout the year, and in the 20 years that I've been working in various jurisdictions doing this type of work. Certainly petitioners work on their own schedule based upon their own financing. Projects that are self-funded might take a little bit longer, maybe 2 years by the time they start a conversation to the time they make the filing. With a publicly traded company who's a lot more well-funded, certainly I can see them working very diligently to bring a project to fruition.
Speedier than any other project?
No, the state law is very clear and dictates the process to which the Plan Commission deals with a rezoning request and forwarding that to the town council. Plan Commissions, boards of zoning appeals are all regulated by state code. I wouldn't feel that there's anything different with this project versus any other project we see.
As a follow-up to Councilor Spies, I heard a few remonstrators, 2 or 3, talk about this being fast-tracked. Does that exist?
Certainly it could be something that a jurisdiction could try to achieve, but again, getting back to state law predicates and dictates the flow. Certainly it's all about the funding for a petitioner, how fast they can work through the process, but as far as our regimented process, it is a well-published, well-documented system that anybody can view on the town's website as to the dates to file and the dates that need to be achieved.
Follow-up, have we done anything to change or amend or circumvent any of the steps anybody else would have to go through in order to get this kind of approval from the Planning Commission?
No.
There's a lot of concern about a traffic study, and that's something that the special use isn't required for that, or?
The zoning ordinance is very clear, and I thought we described this very clearly at the Plan Commission meeting when this question came up on April 15th or 16th. I don't remember the exact date. A traffic study shall be required to be filed with any rezone or other types of petitions when that petition meet or exceeds the warrants of the NDOT Applicant's Guide of Traffic Impact Studies. And it goes on to mention various metrics. The Little League did not meet those metrics, and therefore a traffic study was not something the staff could justifiably request. We vetted that very particular and very specific point with our traffic engineer prior to the hearing, and the traffic engineer's response was ask for one when the petition comes in for the subdivision and require them jointly. On April 26th, we provided the petitioner a letter, since the filing for the plat did not include a traffic impact study, to indicate that we were requiring one and we had justification for it.
For the home development, that has to have a traffic study. And will that traffic study include effects of the Little League also?
Our specific request of the petitioner was to provide a traffic study that encompassed both the Little League 18 acres and the 78 homes. Complete one study for review.
So if I don't know much about traffic studies, if that comes back and, how would is there something that it would come back and say, no, you can't do this development because of the traffic study? Or is there things that would be tied to that? Okay, you have to do this to put the development in?
traffic study should come back with recommendations to improvements to intersections in order to meet the town's standard for a level of service at intersections. Certainly, if there are failures or other concerns, those will need to be mitigated as throughout the public process.
The roads that abut this, are those, and maybe this is a question for Lance, Mr. Lance, are those responsibility of Zionsville to make them in good shape, or is that the county?
Those will be town of Zionsville roadways that are planned to be improved.
I had received an email, someone was concerned about that we were building a roundabout related to this development. Was that roundabout because of this development, or is that roundabout part of the master plan for 875 and Whitestown Road?
I would suspect a traffic engineer can best answer that question, but there's two choices, of course. There's the roundabout or a signalized or some sort of stop control intersection. I would suspect the warrants are suggesting at the installation of a roundabout.
If we were to override the Planning Commission based on RSF2 zoning, what could be built there then? Of the 58 acres in terms of number of homes?
Are you indicating that if the town council were to deny the request for the SU7 18-acre rezone and just that petition would go away, someone could come in at any point in time and propose a RSF2 subdivision meeting either RSF2 standards or RSF2 standards or RSF2 open space standards?
That's what I'm asking. Yeah,
Yes.
if they weren't asking for this, if they weren't asking for this exception for these 15 acres, and it was just a plain development, how many homes could go in there as the RSF2 standard, as it's zoned today?
Well, it's at 57 acres. It's about 100, but clearly a party could not develop 100 homes on that parcel because of infrastructure needs for roadway needs. The petitioner has illustrated that 78 homes could be built on that acreage and function in a marketplace.
Is concern as far as using the open spaces or green spaces, whatever you want to call it, from one owner to another owner. Is that something has that occurred anyplace else in town where developers using somebody else's open space?
We've not specifically identified a place where that has been accomplished. We understand, I understand personally that previously, prior to my being here, that Carter Station was a part of, was utilized in a very similar fashion.
Approving the zoning this evening, are we implicitly approving the development plan?
No, this particular petition that's in front of you this evening is a petition that is by your choice and a legislative decision, and it's a rezoning. It's a standalone request in front of you.
So by process, could you describe what the petitioner would have to do in order to get the plan approved for the development?
Certainly, because actually all those steps are on file, best to my knowledge. There is a variance petition that's currently pending. A staff report has been published and is available on the town's website specific to the action that's been requested of the Board of Zoning Appeals on May 9th, which is this Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. There's multiple requests for variances within there dealing with open space standards, the separation of the acreage that's intended to be conveyed to the Little League. There's a variance request in that overall package seeking deviation from the standards of the business-office designation related to different architectural features. So that is one particular step. The second step that's in front of the petitioner that they have filed for is the preliminary plats and development plans to facilitate the entirety of the development, be it the Little League, all of its facilities, the office building, or the 78 home sites and all of its infrastructure. Additionally, the petitioner has also filed a secondary plat, which is the first step to recordation of the lots if they were to be approved by the Plan Commission, all the infrastructure were to be installed, or the applicant post the appropriate amount of bonding to allow the Plan Commission to facilitate the recordation prior to the installation of improvements.
So they have to go in front of the PCA and the Planning Commission? They have to go in front of the BZA and the Planning Commission and in essence follow the process that any other developer would have to follow in order to get a subdivision approved.
That's correct. The May 9th Board of Zoning Appeals, and then the May 21st Plan Commission.
So at any given time, if anybody has an issue with that, be it from any of these governing bodies or ourselves on the council, we could bring those concerns forward and have the developer adjust accordingly?
Yes, that is the appropriate time.
Okay.
So, looking through some keywords that some of the remonstrators talked about, and to Councilor Suarez's point there, because I don't want any vote here to be an implied approval of the development, because that's not what we're talking about here today. I'm assuming that the Planning Commission is going to look at things like traffic studies, density, transition phasing, abatement to rural zoned areas. That's all part of BZA and Planning Commission in terms of what they are reviewing as they would with any development. Is that a fair statement?
The Commission will be looking at anything that's under their purview specific to law, as well as that's specific to the subdivision control ordinance, the zoning ordinance, which also dictates out what the development plan can contain. The BZA as well has a little bit broader jurisdiction in what it can look at and what it can require and consider as being a quasi-judicial group rather than the Plan Commission, which is more ministerial in nature. But those two groups will review the items that you mentioned, yes.
Are we, do you know if we are required to make a vote tonight, or could we defer this? And the reason I ask that question is it's pretty clear to me that the people here with issues with the project feel like they just hadn't had enough time or information, and quite frankly, given the fact that this thing's been kicking around since sometime in the fourth quarter of last year, and they're just hearing about it here in the last few months, it does, and under the guise that previously a project had been rejected on the same site, that you know, I understand their sensitivity. Now, let me to be candid, folks. Hey, I'm pro-development, and had you had this information 6 months ago, I'd probably be sitting here thinking this is a great project. Let's do it. So, don't anybody think I'm a big site country guy, because I'm just not. I've always been pro-development here, so I'm not hiding that. But I am somebody that really believes in transparency and making sure you get in front of issues way ahead of the time, so that people like this have a right to get in front of it and potentially work with Pulte, work with the town, work with Little League to come up with a solution that hopefully works for everybody and allows this event to happen. I mean, I like the sporting venue out there. Heck, I was out there watching a young man in the audience throw a winning game a couple weeks ago. So you know, I'm all for it, but I'm also all for folks who have a huge financial investment in that specific area having the opportunity to weigh in, feel like they've been fully heard. And I think if we vote on this tonight, and despite what you said, Josh, I think if we vote on tonight, it's a precursor to having this thing done and done the way that Pulte wants it today. And I'd like to say I'm wrong, but I have to assume that until I see more of what's coming from Pulte, because we haven't done it. And the two-step process to me seems a little peculiar, given that the two things are linked, definitively linked. And no, stop. No, hey guys, hey, I'm telling you guys, if this was here and I saw this 6 months ago, I might have a whole. I'd probably be for it. There's everybody on this council knows I like to build things. That's me. And I've taken a lot of heat from that from constituents in the past, and I appreciate that, and I expect that. And but this two-step process does seem unique for what we've seen here in the community. And normally it's you get the PUD, and okay, we know we got a PUD, but it's going to come back. And I think that's going to happen here, right? I mean, Josh, that's what you got clarification on, that.
It will not come back to us, Tom.
No, but the housing development will go back to BZA.
Yes.
And to
Planning Commission, correct.
Is there, and to do a development like that on that other parcel, there's going to have to be some kind of variance, right, or wrong? Am I missing that?
Yes, there is a variance.
So would that
pending.
come back to the council?
No. Variances are heard by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Well, and again, I think because of that, I do think it creates certainly the perspective on the folks here that have a concern about it, that this is essentially the de facto approval. Even if that's not technically true, I think it is a perception of, you know, the politically elected people up here that we're saying, yeah, go for it, forward, make it happen. And if I'm wrong, you know, you folks who are concerned tonight can let me know that, but that's just what I'm seeing. You know, and again, I think had we been flushing this out with more advanced warning, and you know, at least these folks would have that opportunity to really get their case on the table and perhaps find something else. And obviously, they're pretty upset about it. And again, I you know, in a different light, in a different opening of time between now and when I first heard about it, I would say, hey, let's do this. I still don't like this two-step process. I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense to me why it's two steps, since we're talking about one plot of land and the projects are contingent upon one another. That the fact that we are paying for the utilities to go out there. I know it's in the plan, but we're pretty sparse in our ability to pay for, you know, extension areas. Usually we do have it appears that we do have the home builders participate. We usually have the home builders participate in the payment of the utility development. That's my experience, but you know, again, I'm more concerned about the two-step process. It just seems a little out of stroke for us.
Wayne, Councilor Schuler started with a question about what happens if this is postponed today. What happens to what is going on with the BZA and the Planning Commission? Do those, I assume, also get postponed?
The staff report that we have put together related to the Board of Zoning Appeals suggests that the variance request be continued until such time that there is disposition of the rezoning request that's in front of you. Certainly, that's just the staff's, you know, verbiage that we put in a report. The Board of Zoning Appeals will choose a direction that they choose to go based upon when they meet and voice their opinions. The Plan Commission as well. We haven't reviewed in totality the filing, nor have we put together a staff report related to that. Part of this question may be best answered by your attorney as to a delay or a continuance.
So you have a couple options. When we get a petition from the Planning Commission, we have a couple options. We have 90 days to take some action. So you can either, within that 90-day period from which it was certified, vote to approve the Plan Commission's recommendation or reject the Plan Commission's recommendation. If you choose to do nothing within that 90 days, it will be as if you approved it. So that's sort of the timeframe options on which they originally provided us the petition. So you got a little bit of time, to your point, if you choose to do that.
How many days?
90 days from the date it was certified, so that would be from the Plan Commission vote.
So and that's last week?
Yeah, I think I can give you the date. It's in that document that's in your packet.
So the housing development's not looking to redo the zoning, they just want a variance on the zoning. So the housing development's not going to come in front of us at all.
As it's filed currently, no, it would not.
Just to clarify on the prior proposal by Pulte back in 2014, as convenient as it is, I happened to sit on that BZA for that vote, and the issue that you can look back at the reason it was denied. The variances, there were a laundry list of variances that would not have been needed if the southeast corner, because at that time the property took up 3 corners of that intersection, and the properties on the northeast and southeast corner essentially would have needed to be rezoned in order to go forward with like a cluster rather than go forward with the numerous variances that were being requested. So the BZA at that time recommended, well, we denied all of their all of their variances and recommended they go back and work on possibly rezoning those 2 corners to do it in what we thought at that time would be a better process than. So this particular corner was not the issue. It was the other 2 out of the 3.
I would like to ask a question of one of the audience members that I think is relevant to this conversation. Mr. Price, if you could please step up to the podium and introduce yourself.
Excuse me, good evening, Mr. President, members of the council, Matt Price, representing Pulte Homes and Little League International.
Really quick, Councilor Suarez, Mr. Bryce, I sure you will, but I'd like you up there just to answer questions council may have and no presentation, please.
Absolutely.
That's accurate. Thank you. Mr. Price, the reason I thought it would be relevant for you to answer this question is because the issue of timeliness and time constraints has been brought up, and I thought it was important to hear from the petitioner side as to what the timing and requirements are from your perspective.
Yes. So when Zionsville submitted its proposal to be the home for the Central Region headquarters, one of the conditions of that proposal was to play the inaugural tournament in the summer of 2019. And so we laid out a schedule with planning staff and representatives of the town to obtain the entitlements in time to begin construction on the fields to meet that deadline. And so we are at the beginning phases of that process now. We've completed the rezoning hearing with the Plan Commission on April 16th. As you've heard, 5-1 vote in favor. And this is that middle step before we go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and then back to the Plan Commission for plat and development plan approval. It is not a unique process in the sense that it is the published process for the relief the petitioner is seeking. And so we have no choice but to follow that roadmap, and that's what we've done. And so, and we've been transparent throughout the entire process. Members of the public have had an opportunity to speak and will have an opportunity to speak going forward.
So a vote to move the process back, whatever the decision is of the council, would affect you how?
It could potentially jeopardize our ability to begin construction on time and meet our commitment to play in the summer of 2019. That's the risk we run.
Thank you.
Wasn't this originally supposed to be on the school's property?
Initially, there were conversations with the school corporation about a facility really just behind the Pearson Ford Tennis Center, which also has a special use zoning classification. They determined that that was not feasible from their perspective because they needed the property. They had a kind of a laundry list of issues. Even if that had gone on the school property, the Little League committee was going to be required to make a commitment to replace their property. In other words, we had to find a substitute parcel for the parcel that they at least initially thought might be feasible. And so there was never going to be a free piece of property or a piece of property that didn't involve some private participation. And that's what's going on here. Pulte Homes is donating the 18 acres to Little League. That's what's unique about this proposal. And I wanted to add one other thing too. There's no free rides for Pulte. Pulte is paying for their share of the utilities. So it's not a matter of the town donating utility costs to benefit Pulte. It's donating the right-of-way for 875, which would otherwise have to be purchased by the town. It's donating the right-of-way for the roundabout. And it's paying for its share of the utilities to serve this property. So there's no free ride. It's the other way around. The Zionsville Organizing Committee brought Pulte in as a participant because it was prepared to donate the acreage to Little League International.
Is the donation to the Little League, as far as Little League's concerned, is that a deal breaker if they can't find quote unquote free land? Is that if the Little League doesn't get if somebody doesn't give the Little League land, then Little League can't afford to buy land to put their headquarters here?
Sir, our proposal, the town's proposal, which was a competitive process throughout the central region, involved, I believe, over 40 different proposals from communities around the central region, was free land and a commitment to raise another $1.5 million to help offset construction costs.
The plans are like 2,500 seats in the two stadiums. And there's, somebody said, what, 292 or like say 300 and make the math easy parking spaces. That's like 4 people a car. Where are all these people going to park?
That issue was raised during the Plan Commission meeting. There's 2 things to consider. One is average attendance is not capacity by any means. Give you an example, for the softball tournament, typically averages fewer than 200 participants per day of the 7-day tournament. There's a similar comparison with regard to the baseball tournament. When we were unable to successfully negotiate the land with the school did offer other potential assistance to us in the form of a possibility for reciprocal parking, where we could park at the school facilities, which are nearby, and have participants and fans walk down the sidewalks that will be built as part of the reconstruction of 875 to this field. It's what makes the project ideal for this location, is that the infrastructure that you've all discussed here this evening was already planned. It's what led to the choice of this property. 875 was already going in, roundabout already going in, sidewalks already going in, school close by that can provide overflow parking. That's what drove the selection committee to this location as an initial matter, and that's why I believe it was supported by the Planning Commission.
One of the problems that a lot of the remonstrators have is that, like, nobody ever told us that. And it was asked of me, it's like, you know, the town's been meeting with these people for a long time, and the town never told us that the development was going in. I'm like, well, I'm not sure that's the town's responsibility. Is it developers? Maybe that was a question for Wayne. Is that a developer's responsibility? What kind of time frame is a normal time frame for, I know they brought out the Wolf Run, and I know they had at least 2 meetings out there with the neighbors at Wolf Run. What kind of time frame is a normal, you know, say I'm a developer, I want to develop a piece of property. When do I, along that process, when do I contact the neighbors? Do I have to contact? Is it law that I have to, or is it just courtesy to do it?
Not law, but I would say it is courtesy. This was, in its initial formative stages, a volunteer effort. The Little League Selection Committee and volunteers total nearly 1,000 people in Zionsville that participated as a volunteer in one form or another to secure this location. When we eventually got the property under contract, we reached out to various of the surrounding property owners, including Mr. Schiffrel, who was contacted. He was the very first person contacted 10 days after we had an executed contract for this location. Regrettably, and I'm not saying it's Mr. Schiffrel's fault, but regrettably, we weren't able to connect and talk face-to-face about the proposal until in March. We did have outreach in a way I think that was commensurate with other projects. I will say, too, it is a bit of a sliding scale. This proposal is on property that's zoned RSF2. There are no more homes being proposed on this property than what's permitted by right, which I think was a question that Mr. President was asking earlier. So on a sliding scale, it's typically not like a rezoning where there is more community outreach earlier on.
If the special use gets approved, but the variances do not, then does Pulte do what the school did and pull the carpet out from underneath the Little League? Or do they're going to go ahead and write a check, buy that property, and give it to Little League?
No. The deals are,
it's a deal breaker.
The transaction is intertwined. It's a deal breaker, yes.
However, if the process shows that within the Planning Commission or the BCA, certain issues arise that require Pulte to change some of their schematics or proposed plats, are they open for those discussions?
Yes, and in fact, thank you, Councilor Suarez. In fact, the proposal has evolved since its initial filing to address some concerns raised by the Schiffrels. And so we've rearranged some of the home locations so that wider lots are against the western boundary, and we've been able to increase the buffer along the western perimeter. So those types of discussions have occurred and are ongoing.
The 78 homes, is that a deal breaker? Is it that they have to have 78 homes there to make the deal go, or could they put, 50 in?
We've eliminated 2, so it's 76, and that's the number. And that's less than what's permitted by right. So if Little League weren't approved, what you've accomplished is eliminating Little League, but you haven't eliminated 78, or as Mr. DeLong testified to, maybe more homes on the site, including just like that picture right there.
For SF2, the lot that would be, the area, it's 58 acres minus what? So the Pulte development would be how many acres?
It's approximately 40.
And so 78 homes on SF2, that's what's allowed.
Yes, under exactly 78 acres. Once we
Hey, no.
Yeah.
To clarify, I think you do need a variance to put 78 on the 40 acres. Is that a true statement or no?
No.
Okay.
What we need is the variance to count the Little
open
League
space
facility as, quote, off-site open space.
Gotcha.
Now, what I have learned here tonight is that with the Carter Station as perhaps precedent for having off-site open space, I don't know whether Carter Station required a variance or not, but under the open space ordinance, what I've learned here tonight is that perhaps that variance isn't required at all. But that's something that can be vetted in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. That's the proper venue for that issue.
I think what we're trying to highlight here is that there's a lot of things within this plan that we are still in the process of developing and having dialogue around. This is not a closed deal tonight. This is an ongoing issue on the actual development. I think what's been made very clear is regardless of what happens here, a development of some sort or other is most likely going to go into this property. So the choice we have here is whether we move forward with the Little League zoning of this particular parcel and continue working with all parties involved as we look at how to work with the development of the Pulte side. Is that accurate?
That's a fair assessment.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm all done.
Is it fair to say that the reason we've heard people talk about not having all the information, is it fair to say that the reason all the information hasn't been disseminated is because we haven't gone through the process to give everybody the information? I mean, there's still a significant number of steps that have to take place.
I think that's a fair assessment. Yes, everything relating to this project is filed and publicly available for inspection. There have not been public hearings yet that will take place in subsequent phases of the project, as with any other project, following the normal timeframes.
I would maybe also pick up on that, just so you know, there's some backstory, I think, to a couple of the comments. So there was a public records request filed by Mr. Schifferl that we've been working through. So they've had an opportunity to come in and get a copy of the Plan Commission file, which contains a lot of the information. I know Mrs. Schifferl spent a lot of quality time at Town Hall. I'm sure she'd rather be doing something else, but she's had an opportunity to go through a lot of those additional documents as well. And then we have been working, myself and Joe, as well as the various departments, on an electronic email review. So Mr. Schifferl had asked for all emails with the number of different qualifications back into January 1 of 2017. So we've provided that. I think the documents that he had in his hand were the documents we shared with him on Friday. My days are all smushing together. So that only goes back until when we received the Little League announcement that they were choosing the town. So we owe him some additional documents to that request. It's just a matter of working through them. We got a number, not just this one, but a number of public records requests we're working through. So we tried to prioritize them by making sure that everything post-approval, when any sort of development would be discussed, would be given first. Then we'll go back through anything prior to that, which hopefully we'll have by the end of the week. So I think that was at least one of the comments somebody made. That was part of the reference, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of what documents were still needed.
Thank you. And just one follow-up question. Obviously, the emails that we've all received are emotional emails, right? And one of the questions, or one of the subjects that continues to come up in the emails that I've received are quote unquote backroom deals. Have you been involved with the town at all in any backroom deals specific to this? Okay. Thank you.
That's outrageous, too, for the comments. I understand that we can lose decorum here, but I'm a citizen here, too. I've lived here since 1980. I played Little League Baseball here, too, and have coached and volunteered and donated my money as well. And I deserve that. I wasn't sneering or laughing at anyone's comments before now, and we all deserve that same respect.
I agree, Mr. Price. Any other questions for Mr. Price? Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments in general from this council?
I think with all the concerns involved, this needs to be postponed until we find out what the BZA says.
And that may be what we end up doing. That may be fine. But one thing to keep in mind, that if we were to approve the zoning change tonight, and they go before the BZA and say they get it turned down, likely Pulte's still going to build on that property, regardless of if the baseball field's there or not. Say, they've asked for it in this order. At least if it gets denied by the Board of Zoning Appeals, that would require them to have to go back through the process to change it back. To rezone it back from a special use. I mean, it gives a little bit of leverage if they've already got the zoning change in place. Do they really want to spend the money to rezone it back to what it already was? I don't know. There's a lot to this.
If we postpone it, it will also then go to the morning meeting, which was sort of, the intent of that was really to be more of a administrative meeting. This is obviously a pretty big subject. I know this council, prior to you joining, Jason, but this council voted 5-0 to fund the Little League RFP, which we won. And Pulte, to their credit, is the only group that has stood up and said, here's some land you can have. So, we're kind of the mailman that caught we caught the car, the dog caught the car. What are we going to do with it? We can kick it down the road another couple months or so, but I think the remonstrators have very good points, and there is a process for that, and we have a very good BZA, and we have a very good planning commission, and I expect them to take the remonstrators' points into consideration. And as Councilor Suarez said, and I know Councilor Schuler, I understand your point in this, but our endorsement of this rezone is not an endorsement of this project. And I expect that Pulte is going to work with the BZA and the Planning Commission in their concerns that were brought up by this group to come up with a development that works for everyone. That is my anticipation on record, and I would communicate that to both of those bodies as well, and probably will if this is passed.
And this group doesn't get to communicate those concerns unless we take action on something, correct?
Communicate concerns in terms of?
To the BZA or anybody else moving forward until we take action on that.
Correct.
Well, we don't really have any say-so about what the BZA or the Planning Commission. We have no impact there. This is the only thing we have impact.
Yeah.
So what the final project bill will be what those guys approve based on what I heard. So we're out after this.
I'd make a motion to postpone this to the next meeting.
I've got a motion to continue from Councilor Spies. Yes.
President, I'd like to, at this time, I'd like to say that due to my involvement with the Zionsville Local Organizing Committee, I'm going to recuse myself from a vote on this matter. So
That makes sense. Accepted.
I would second Councilor Spies.
Okay, I've got.
Because I think, too, they don't lose any timeline. Right, Brian? Is that what you were telling me? I mean, you're more experienced with the Planning Commission BZA than I am, having been on one of them.
Tom, can you speak into the mic, please?
I'm sorry,
That's
Brian.
okay.
I was asking Brian, Councilor Traylor, they're not going to lose any timeline, are they, or not?
Only if they ask to continue it from the BZA due to and then you get into a cycle. But as long as they keep going down the path, then no. In my opinion, you come back in the morning meeting of the 21st, and hopefully by then you've got a decision by the BZA and have a better idea of whether this is an approvable deal, or if they could end up continue it in any way to have further negotiations with Pulte on what's an acceptable project.
And is there any way that we'll know, and maybe this is a Matt question if he's still here, whether or not the team at Pulte are going to continue to try to work with the folks that have been here tonight and their neighbors to, maybe come up with some successful resolution? I'm not saying there will be one, but to try to come up with a successful compromise that everybody is on board with. Again, because I will tell you, guys, while it may look like on your side, I'm really on the side of getting the information out there, and I do like. I'm a pro-development guy, so I don't want any misunderstanding there. Nobody pat me on the back, but I want these folks to have an opportunity to get as much impact on this project that's going to happen. Because if you were to ask me, I said, hey, at one point we're going to pass this thing. This 7 councilors here, 4 of them are going to vote for it. It's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be a bad thing for the community. I think it'll be a good thing, but I just like to give the folks a chance to get as much input as they can before it's done. So,
I have a motion to continue from Councilor Spies, a second from Councilor Schuler. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I might do a roll call on that one. Councilor Plunkett? No. Yes?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes? No. Abstain? Yes. All right. We've got a tie. Yeah, 2 deferring. Yes. All right. We've got a tie.
We have a tie, which really just means we have no action. So we'll take it up on the May meeting, the next meeting. What'd you say? You could be another motion, that's correct. And maybe I was just going to maybe say for a point of clarification, I just want to maybe understand what the counselor's expectation is, because when Mr. DeLong, and I'm not trying to influence your decision, I think it'd be helpful for the folks here to have a clear expectation of next steps, whatever your decision ultimately is. But Mr. DeLong noted that the staff recommendation was for the BZA to not take action on the variance until the town council took action in this meeting on the rezone request. So I think that if we're expecting that we're going to make some decision based on what the BZA does, we may be a little bit circular. So I just wanted to point that out to you all. There could be another motion that is correct, since we have a tie, if there's anybody that feels so inclined to make a different motion.
Just for clarity, with regard to my supporting what Councilor Spies offered, was that I just wanted to give 2 more weeks to the folks out there to communicate with us. I mean, we've literally been getting this communication, and it's been since the last 4 days that we've been getting a lot of emails, 5 days. It's been heaped on us pretty heavy, and it just seems like as long as we're not endangering the opportunity here, that's what I'm thinking about. So that's not so much not waiting for what the BZA or the Planning Commission is going to do personally.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't getting into some circular waiting on each other.
Matt, would Pulte just wait, or would they push to have the BZA go on through?
I haven't spoken to Pulte about that situation. I am concerned that the staff report has been published. That recommendation or suggestion is in the published staff report, that if this gets tabled, he's recommending that get tabled. That's in the public domain now. Secondly, I think there was a very significant piece of information communicated tonight, which is new to me and may obviate the need for any variance relating to the open space, which is that the Carter Station project may be precedent for perhaps not requiring a variance. So I just want to make that part of the discussion tonight, because I think that is new information.
Matt, is there any way that they could get to the BZA, even though you have this recommendation from Wayne's team? Could you still go in front of the BZA? Could you?
Matt, before you answer, could you come to the mic just so it's on the public record, please? Thank you. Yeah, will you maybe repeat just for the public record what you just said before you answer Councilman's?
Quick. Okay. So the 2 things I said were, 1, the current published staff report, which has been made public, says if the council were to table the matter, he would recommend that the BZA proceeding similarly be tabled. The second thing I said was that that a new piece of information, at least to me, is that there may be precedent out there for having off-site open space that did not require a variance. So that may obviate the need for one or more of the pending variances. To answer Councilor Schuler's question, which is, could we go forward with the BZA? I think the answer is yes, you could. It is not, that's not the timeline that we laid out in consultation with the town at the beginning of the year and that we've tried very, very hard to follow. We have representatives of Little League International that are here tonight. We're going to stay over for Wednesday. So it's to answer you, I mean, I guess we could. Hearing what I've heard tonight, I think my recommendation to my client would be not to go forward on Wednesday night, in all candor to you.
Well, we're sort of a bit of deadlock here. However, I think it's important to continue this process. I really do. So I will throw out another motion to adopt this on final reading. I've got a second from Councilor Suarez. I will ask for a roll call vote on this. If you're voting yes, you are agreeing to adopt this on a final reading and send this to the BZA and ultimately the Planning Commission if they approve it. Councilor Plunkett?
Oh, we're not sending this to the BZA.
No, not this,
right.
But the continue the process.
Just making it clear.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Councilor Plunkett? Yes. Councilor Spies? No. Yes?
Yes.
Councilor Suarez?
Just for clarity, we're voting on moving this forward.
We just the
Correct.
15-acre
Or affirming the rezone,
ordinance.
if you vote
the
yes.
Rezone. Abstain. Okay. The motion to adopt on final reading passes with a vote of 4 in favor, 2 opposed, 1 abstention. Any other matters to discuss? Okay. I've got approval from claims. I've got to take a motion to approve.
Moved.
Got a first from Councilor Suarez. Second from Councilor Plunkett. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Claims are approved by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. I would take a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Got a first from Councilor Hopper, second from Councilor Schuler. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we are adjourned by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Monday, May 21st, 2018 at 7:30 a.m. in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chamber. Meeting adjourned. Did you get it? Yeah. Is that crossed out?